I'm a political strategist. Other than that, who cares? Just consider this on the merits.
All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're breaking down a really high stakes showdown that's been developing in Minneapolis. And look, this is way more than just politicians fighting. The analysis we're about to walk through argues that this is a strategic trap, one that could put the entire city's future on the line. So let's unpack how a massive federal threat has created what is, well, a really dangerous conflict of interest for the city's very own leaders. Wow. Okay, so it kicks off with this. This is a direct, public threat from the Deputy Attorney General. I mean, there is zero subtlety here, right? He's calling out Governor Walz and Mayor Frey by name, and he's calling their actions terrorism. This goes way beyond typical politics. He says it's not a threat, it's a promise. That just sets the stakes incredibly high right from the very beginning. And it didn't stop there. This wasn't just some one-off comment. The pressure gets layered on almost immediately. Now you have the DHS secretary framing local policy not just as a disagreement, no, but as a felony. So what we're really seeing here is a coordinated message. It's coming from the highest levels of the federal government, and they are painting a very, very clear target. Okay, Section 1, a federal pincer attack. How federal actors are targeting Minnesota's leadership. So you have to ask, what's the actual strategy here? Well, the analysis we're digging into argues that these threats, they're not random at all. They're part of a very specific strategy called a pincer attack. Think of it like a two-pronged assault, designed to squeeze Minnesota's leadership from two totally different directions at the same time. So what does this pincer attack actually look like? Well, on one side, you've got this really serious legal threat. We're talking federal charges like obstruction, maybe even treason, all tied to the ICE issue. Then, coming from the other side, it's a completely different line of attack, public allegations of corruption and fraud. It's a classic squeeze play, right? They're using the full force of the legal system and the power of public opinion at the same time. Let's dive into that first arm of the pincer, the obstruction probe. And you have to understand, this isn't just talk. This is real. The DOJ has opened a formal criminal probe into both Governor Walz and Mayor Frey. The charge? Conspiracy to impede federal officers. And here's the kicker. Grand jury subpoenas have already been served. This is an active, ongoing federal investigation happening right now. All right, now for the second arm of that pincer, the corruption angle. This part is all about creating a public narrative. You've got the administration publicly calling the area a hub of fraudulent money laundering, tying it to the whole feeding our future scandal. And it's not just words. They're freezing federal childcare funds. They're even throwing around hints of racketeering, RICO charges. It's a really potent mix of financial pressure and public shaming. All right, Section 2, the real conflict. Beyond the obvious battle lines. So, okay, we have this very clear external threat, right? It's the federal government versus Minneapolis leadership. Seems pretty straightforward. But the analysis we're looking at says that this obvious battle, it might not actually be the most dangerous part of the equation, at least not for the people of the city. The real risk, it argues, lies somewhere else entirely. And this brings us to the absolute core question of this whole analysis. What if the biggest threat isn't the federal attack itself, but how your leaders might react to it? What if the real danger is that this pressure could push your own elected officials into a corner, a place where their own personal interests, just staying out of jail, no longer line up with what's best for the public? So to really get a grip on this risk, you have to stop thinking of it as a simple two-sided fight. The analysis brings in this idea of the third side. It's saying, hey, this is not just Minneapolis versus the feds. In reality, there are three distinct groups here, each with their own goals that might be in conflict. You've got the citizens, you've got their politicians, and then you've got the federal government. Section 3, the agent and the principal, explaining a severe conflict of interest. Okay, so to break this all down, the analysis uses a classic concept from game theory and economics. It's called the principal-agent problem, and it's a really powerful way to understand the severe conflict of interest that this federal pincer attack is creating. So what on earth is the principal-agent problem? It actually sounds more complicated than it is. Think of it this way. The principal, that's the citizens, the people, hires an agent, in this case, the politicians, to act on their behalf. The problem happens when that agent, the politician, gets a personal reason, a personal incentive to act in their own self-interest instead of doing what's best for the principal, the people they're supposed to represent. And this right here is where you can see that split, that divergence of incentives become crystal clear. The principal, the citizens of Minneapolis, what's their goal? Well, it's justice and safety for their community. But the agent, the politicians, suddenly they have a new, overriding goal, just personal survival. Why? Because they're facing a risk the public isn't, a federal indictment. We're talking about their personal freedom being on the line. And this, right here, is the absolute core of the problem. The personal penalty of indictment decouples the agent's survival from the principal's victory. What that means is the politician's fate is no longer tied to the city's fate. They can now get a personal win, by staying out of jail, even if the city takes a huge collective loss by not getting any justice. Their incentives are just not aligned with the people anymore. Section 4, the immunity trade, the strategic danger of a backroom deal. So, with this huge conflict of interest now in play, what's the specific danger? What's the worst-case scenario? Well, the analysis warns of something called the immunity trade. It's a situation where cutting a secret backroom deal becomes the most logical, the most rational thing for these compromised leaders to do. So, how could something like this actually play out? Let's look at the context. After the tragic shooting of Alex Pretty, the city and the people gained this enormous moral authority from all the public outrage. The analysis has a name for this: captured surplus. It's basically a massive stockpile of political leverage. And this is so important to understand. That leverage is a public asset. It belongs to the people of Minneapolis. And that question leads us to the central tension of this whole crisis. The people may own this asset, this moral capital, this leverage for real change, but who controls the negotiation? Who's sitting at the table deciding how to spend it? The answer, of course, is the very same politicians who are being personally threatened by the people on the other side of that table. See the problem? Okay, so this lays out exactly how a self-preservation transaction could go down. Step 1. The feds offer to drop the criminal probes against Walls and Frey. Their personal legal nightmare goes away. Step 2. In return, the politicians agree to de-escalate the city's demands. They quiet things down, they manage the public's expectations downwards. Step 3. The politicians save their careers, they avoid prison, a huge personal win for them. And Step 4. The people of Minneapolis lose all their leverage and get no real justice. The public asset is spent, but not for the public good. Section 5, a transparency ultimatum, the proposed solution to neutralize the risk. So, faced with this really frightening risk, the analysis doesn't just stop at diagnosing the problem. It actually proposes a very specific, actionable solution that's designed to completely neutralize this threat, and it's called the transparency ultimatum. And the logic behind this solution is actually powerful because it's so simple. This whole principal-agent problem, this risk of betrayal, it only works in the dark. It thrives on secrecy, what economists call information asymmetry. Basically, the agent can cut a deal that the principal, the public, doesn't know about. So what's the solution? You just remove the secrecy. You force the deal into the light of day, because a deal made in public can't betray the public. And so this is the ultimatum that the analysis proposes. It starts by laying down the foundation, the core principle. The leverage created by the shooting of Alex Pretty belongs to the people of Minneapolis. And then it makes a demand. We demand absolute real-time transparency on all negotiations with the DOJ. And it's not shy about the reason why. Because Governor Walz and Mayor Frey are currently compromised. And here's the final powerful part of that ultimatum. It says that because they are compromised, they have a direct incentive to cut a backroom deal that trades away real justice in exchange for their own personal immunity. And then, this is the kicker. Anything less than total visibility is indistinguishable from a betrayal. Wow. I mean, that's a line in the sand. It basically says if we can't see it, we have to assume it's a sellout. Now, it's really important to be clear about something. This strategic analysis, it's not arguing that these leaders are bad people with malicious intent. It's an argument about structure. It's about leverage. The way it frames it is that the politicians have become hostages of the federal legal system. And when a hostage is negotiating for their life, can you really trust them to protect anyone but themselves? In that kind of scenario, the people of Minneapolis and their fight for justice, they become the ransom. And so that's where this analysis leaves us, with a really powerful question that gets to the very heart of the matter. When trust is compromised, when that fundamental link between the people and their elected leaders is broken by an outside threat, is radical transparency the only solution? Is that kind of complete, unflinching visibility the only way forward to make sure the public's interests are actually protected? That's a question for everyone in Minneapolis and maybe everyone everywhere to think about.
When the government lied on me and threw me in prison, and then snatched me out of my cell, threw me in the hole, went through my legal work product, stole what they wanted to prevent me from fighting the case. While all that was going on, there was this misconception in the BOP that 041 Minnesotans that we were fucking soft. But one thing about us, there ain't nothing fucking soft about us.